When I talk about standards in an MSP side of the world, most people lean into the technical side of the world. They don't think about the other piece. I think there's a whole other piece of standardization that people frequently kind of leave behind because it's not the thing that they're most comfortable with. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because if you are not dealing with the support standards that go along with the tech standards, you're leaving some efficiencies behind. My name is Adam Hammond. Welcome to Ramblings of a Geek. I've been in the MSP space for the better part of a couple decades, and I've been there, done that with a lot of this tech standards, support standards, and trying to like level up the processes around dealing with client issues and helping clients become more efficient and all those things for a bunch of years. And this is a thing that I'm quite passionate about. So that's what we're talking about today, is taking those tech standards, which most MSPs do a pretty good job with, and layering on some support standards that will really maximize the efficiencies and really benefit the client and the MSP. Now, this week I'm out on a lake because why not? Also, it is pretty quickly going to go from a frozen lake to a liquid lake to then to a warm lake where people swim in just a matter of a couple months. And it's starting to warm up by me. So thankfully this week's a lot warmer than last week. Last week was rather chilly. So let's go ahead and get into the conversation around standards. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about tech standards for a minute because I think that's really important. These tech standards are the foundation for kind of how you layer on some of these support standards. So if I think about tech standardization and the things that I care the most about, there's really 5 things I care about, really, from a tech standpoint. Standard number 1 is I gotta have the security stack on there. No matter what size of client, no matter what's going on there, I need the security stack, which is the EDR, the XDR, the user training components, the email security, all of that stuff that goes into your security standards. That's important. That needs to be there. Case closed. There's no equivocating on that at all. I would even suggest that your break fix clients have that and they pay you a small monthly fee for that, or maybe even not that small of a monthly fee, but they pay you for that so that way you aren't dealing with a bunch of random different security software out there. Now, I might layer on the one extra piece of that is if you have some clients that require a level of compliance that is different from the other part of your client base, maybe that compliance side is like an extra thing. But for the most part, everybody gets the same security across the board because you don't want to be dealing with mismatched security here, there, and everywhere. The second piece of this is also related to security. It's the firewall side of the world, right? I need stack firewalls in every single client. I don't want to have to think about this client uses firewall brand A, and this uses brand B, and this other client uses brand C, because you're dealing with a number of different things. And nothing can erode efficiency more than having to troubleshoot a firewall brand or firewall language you're not used to, right? So back in the day, I was a WatchGuard guy. That was a thing that we just kind of used because they worked out well for us. And for whatever reason, we were a WatchGuard shop. If you went from managing a WatchGuard to managing a Fortinet, FortiGate firewall, it's entirely different. Just wildly different ways of handling things that can really slow you down, right? And if you are supporting every firewall under the sun, and it doesn't matter what brands you support necessarily, as long as they're kind of enterprise business grade support or business grade firewalls, you're probably fine. But the idea here is that if you are trying to remember, what's here, what's there, what's different about these individual firewall brands, it's going to slow things down, and it only gets worse as you get to be bigger. So think about whatever firewall brand you want to lean into, and that becomes your stack firewall. The third thing is all about backups. I need one backup product for on-premise stuff and in the cloud stuff. And if you have to have one on-premise backup solution and one different backup option for in the cloud, fine, but you only have one of each, right? You don't have 6, 12, 18, 24 different backup brands, and 24 sounds like a lot. It is. I have actually seen an MSP have 24 different backups that they were supporting that were different from each other. And it was a mess for everyone involved, right? So the idea here is you want to have as few backup options as you possibly can. Ideally, one for on-prem, one for in cloud, and if you can merge them together, even so much the better, right? But the idea is you have one backup standard as close as possible. Fourth thing is you want to have some amount of user management that's centralized. Centralized user management is vital. You don't want to have work group computers. Think about kind of olden days of managing workstations. You don't want to deal with that. You want to have one centralized place for passwords, password resets, and all of those things. And this leads into the fifth thing is really the productivity suite, email suite, those kinds of things, right? Whether you're a Microsoft shop or a G Suite with Slack and some of those other things in shops, kind of don't care, but you want to have a standard there as well, because frankly, it is far easier to support one set of those things or the other. And now if you have a little bit of both, cool, but as long as you aren't still dealing with pop email, IMAP email, hosted Exchange some other place, on their own Exchange servers, like those kind of things are things that are time to kind of eject out the side window if you possibly can. Only in a very specific business case that I would think about doing some sort of like on-prem Exchange or hybrid Exchange model or something like that, and would have to have a very specific business case for it before I'd even think about it, right? So those are the 5 things that I would consider to be non-negotiables in my stack. Everything else, what kind of workstations do they have, or laptops? What brand of servers do they have? All of that other stuff, kind of don't care, or it's not super important. You could throw in network switches and Wi-Fi and stuff. Yeah, probably want to have those in there too. But honestly, those are things that you can tackle a little bit later as needed, right? Those things that get swapped out on a relatively regular basis anyway. So maybe you get to those things in a little bit. I'm talking about, these are the 5 that I would not go on to ongoing long-term support without having them be my stack. When we think about standardization and tech stack and all of that, one thing I want you to think about is configuration drift on your network devices for your clients, because that can be a real big problem. And I've partnered up with a company called IronDiff. IronDiff's whole process, whole platform is designed to eliminate configuration drift and track and back up all of those configurations for your network devices and all those things for your clients. They're very MSP forward, and they really know what they're doing. Go ahead and use my code Ramblings05 for 5% off the lifetime of your order. We'd love to have you give it a shot, and let me know how it goes for you, because it's important for me to know and understand that the sponsors of these videos are doing something that can help you in your business. So that's the tech side of the world, right? That's the tech side, and that's the important piece. Now, to go along with those pieces, there's really a couple things from a process side of the world that I want to make sure that everybody thinks about as well. And this is really where the efficiencies are gained in a big way. Because usually what happens is, as you grow your business, you grow your MSP, add more clients, add more tech staff, and those kind of things, you have clients will say, gee, it feels like when I call, I don't get my person anymore. I used to talk to so-and-so, but I never get to talk to them anymore because they're always so busy. Or I just don't feel like you guys know us very well anymore. That is actually a sign of clients not understanding that you've grown a little bit and your team has gotten a little bit bigger. Because ultimately, your clients really don't care who they talk to. I mean, yeah, they do maybe a little tiny bit, but they really only care about, I called in or I opened a ticket and someone helped me out. If they call in and open a ticket and somebody different answers the phone every single time they call and their issues get solved, they're not complaining about not having their guy or their person or whatever, right? And that's a thing you want to be thinking about. And one of the ways to combat this is to have standard ways of dealing with certain things. And there's a couple things I want to talk about. The first one being remote access. Every client, as best as you possibly can make it, should have the same exact remote access opportunity, technology, methodology for connecting, whatever that looks like, as best as you possibly can, right? And you may run into a little bit of difference here, where maybe you have remote clients have everything was in the cloud. Maybe their business was born in the cloud and they don't have any on-premise servers. Cool. Then that's maybe one version of that, because everything is kind of remote access at that point. Everything's cloud-based, and you have some conversation around, what do you do when you're in public Wi-Fi? Do you have a zero trust, zero trust solution that requires you to be on some sort of VPN, so that way, people aren't surfing your credentials in transit, or those kind of things? You might have something like that for those types of clients. That's probably the one difference than I would maybe have elsewhere. But if I'm thinking about more of a traditional business where they've got some on-premise stuff, some stuff in the cloud, and people need to get access to those things, I want you to think about one way of doing remote access for all of your clients as best as you possibly can make it. So that way, when Jane from client A calls in and they get you're one of your help desk engineers, and your help desk person helps them out, and they know how to do this because they understand it. And then when Joe from client B calls in, it's the same thing, just maybe a different domain name or something like that, where they're not having to remember that client A does VPN and client B does remote desktop, or they log into Azure Virtual Desktop and do some stuff there. Having the same way as much as you possibly can make it is going to make your tech's lives easier and will make your clients' lives easier as a result. So think about it that way. One of the things about sitting on this lake that I didn't think about is that if I move my feet too much, I can easily slip and fall. So that'll be kind of fun for the bloopers at the end. Anyway, different issue. And oh, by the way, having a standard firewall and standard way of accessing things like their 365 data or their productivity suite data, like having all that stuff like as part of your tech stack enables this to be a whole heck of a lot easier than trying to figure it out on the fly. So this is one of the reasons why having the tech stack in place is really important. Not only do I do these videos about once a week, I do a newsletter about once a month. The newsletter is a lot about what I got going on, some observations I'm seeing in the space, and just a kind of a way to kind of reconnect every month that's outside of all the socials and all those kind of things. I'm going to drop the link on the screen and then the description of this video below. The second thing is all about file access, right? How do users access their files? And ideally, how do they access their files when they're in the office and remote? And hopefully they're both the same. So that way they're not having to remember I'm in the office, so this is how I do it over here. Now I'm remote, now I have to do it differently over here. If you can make them both be the same, so much the better, right? The idea here is that you're trying to make their life as easy as possible, make their support and their IT experience as consistent as possible, because when you do those things, as consistently as you possibly can, everything is better for the client. And then when everything is better for the client, everything is better for you and your support team as well. So like whether it's like things are on SharePoint and you map it through OneDrive, and you put the user files on OneDrive and you map the libraries in SharePoint and the OneDrive to the SharePoint thing, like whatever that looks like, or whether it's a VPN into a shared network drive, which is kind of old school of doing it, but maybe that's a thing that you have your clients do. Like come up with as few ways of doing that as possible, so that way when the client calls in, you're not having to remember, oh, client A does it one way and client B does it this other way, as much as possible. I understand there's going to be edge cases, and you're going to listen to this video and be like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, of course there's edge cases. Like I've been there, I've done that, I've seen those things. But as often as you possibly can do it, get your clients doing the things the same way, and that will allow your support team to better able to support every single client that calls in, and they're not having to remember all the different nuances from client A to client B to client C. And the third one, and it's really only a third because I just did the third one, and as I'm recording this, it's not any more or less important than the others, is password resets. You want to make password reset process as consistent across your entire client base as you possibly can make it. That way, when your level one is answering the phone or dealing with a client who's having trouble logging in, they don't have to remember, oh, well, you guys do it this other way. I have to log into this AD server to make this change over here versus I can do it in Azure, or it's self-service or whatever, right? Try to make those things as consistent as you possibly can make it, so that way when a client calls in, again, it's the same, you're hearing me say the same thing over and over again, that your team doesn't have to think about it. They just go and solve the problem for the user. Because when you can just solve the problems for the user without making it be some production and making them wait on hold for 10 minutes while you pull up the documentation and figure out, oh yeah, I got to rub my belly and pat my head for this one. And then your next client calls in, you got to pat your head and rub your belly for that one. Like, you want to make sure that you can make sure like this is as consistent as you possibly can make it, because everyone's going to win when you do it this way. Now, there's probably a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, right? I might think about printing. I might think about some other, line of business stuff and whatever it looks like for you and for your clients. Again, there's probably a number of other things. But if I'm thinking about it this way, I have my 5 technical stack items. I got my 3 support stack items. If I can get the tech stack locked and loaded, I can get the process stack locked and loaded, everyone's more efficient. Your clients are going to appreciate it, and you're going to make a whole lot more margin because you can support more clients with less staff, and frankly, less skilled staff, especially when it comes to those password resets, the remote access stuff, and the file access stuff, because I would imagine that that's going to encompass a not insignificant number of tickets and questions and requests from your clients. So those are some really important pieces. Now, I think of the adage of, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is today. Maybe not today since it's still frozen here, but maybe in a couple of weeks when the ground thaws a little bit. When you think about trying to solve for this, let's say you already have a bunch of clients. Well, what do? Well, I'm thinking that maybe you work, client by client, and this can take a year, it could take 2 years, it could take 3 years to get through it all. But the idea is that you start today, establish the standards, and start rolling them out client by client. And every new client gets the new standards, right? So the idea here is that if you're able to start transitioning your client base over and your new clients get whatever the stack stuff is locked in as early as possible, you're in a so much better spot. Now, the reality is that I've been through this with a former MSP that I worked at, where we really ran into this issue, and we worked really hard at re-onboarding as many of our existing clients as possible. And we kind of started with the busier ones so that way we would lower the ticket volume, and it absolutely helped. And the idea with all of this is that if you tie this into my onboarding video and you get your onboarding done really, really well, and you get the client able to call in and get help. You take the next video, which is that 0 to 90 days onboarding video, is where you start implementing some of this stuff. You start having some of these conversations. This starts to happen in that 0 to 90 days, and some of it happens during the onboarding piece, but it really starts, you start laying the groundwork in that 0 to 90 days, and 90 to 120 and 120 to 180, and you start working your way down the path a little bit. That this might take a little bit of time to kind of get these things in place, because you're not going to do all of this during an onboarding, most likely, because that's how an onboarding takes 6, 8, 10 weeks to get done. And I think that's far too long, and it creates a lot of havoc for the client trying to do all of this in one shot. But you layer some of this stuff in over time, and it allows your account manager, whomever is doing that account management process, to have these conversations like, we're going to level this stuff up for you, because when we get you to one single remote access solution, everybody who's traveling, everybody who's working remotely here and there is going to follow the same process and procedure. You're actually going to be more productive out of it. We're going to be better able to support you. Everyone's going to win. Those are conversations that are far easier to have with the client than, hey, why is this remote access stuff suck so bad, right? Those are things that you don't want to be dealing with your clients as much as you possibly can. And actually, it starts in the sales process, right? When you think about the idea on the sales process, you want to start having those stack conversations early on. Basically, it says, hey, we have some tech stack standards that we're gonna expect that you follow. We're gonna have some support stack stuff we're gonna layer in as well. And over the course of our relationship together, we're going to make you more efficient, because it's going to be better for everybody. And you lay that foundation early on in that sales process, everyone's going to win when you do it that way. So like, lean into this process, lean into like leveling things up for your clients, standardizing things as much as you can. Yes, edge cases will exist. You will have a client that needs something that's a little different than everybody else. I get it. Those things will happen. But ideally, most of your clients don't need that. And if you've done a really good job of identifying target clients that you can support over and over and over again, that ideally the same stuff you're doing for client A is the same stuff you do for client B, which is the same stuff you do for client C, which allows you to create a more efficient service desk, more efficient support process, and frankly, a more efficient, better relationship with your clients too, because you're not talking about all these random one-off support issues. You're able to talk about the next thing, right? Some of that business consulting, some of that AI stuff. Because if you are always dealing with the minutia of the day-to-day with the client, you never get a chance to show your value above and beyond that day-to-day firefighting mode. And this allows you to kind of help get your way out of that a little bit as well. So that's a really important conversation, a really important thing to think about when it comes to all things standardization. It's not just the tech, it's also the support stuff that goes along with it. And when you marry those two things together, everybody wins. While you're thinking about all these things, I'm going to drop my client onboarding videos up over here, because those are really important things to think about. And I'm going to drop my account management videos up over here as well, because those two pieces, along with this conversation, really go hand in hand. Thanks for coming on this ramble with me. I hope to see you on the next one.